Slavery in ancient Egypt was a harsh reality. It was deeply entrenched in their society. The life of a slave was filled with hard work and suffering. Many slaves were captured during wars. Others were born into slavery. Slaves were seen as property. They had no personal rights. This dark side of Egyptian civilization is often overshadowed by its grand monuments. Ancient texts and artifacts provide a glimpse into the harshness of slavery. This essay will explore the dark reality of slavery in ancient Egypt. Slavery in Egypt was not based on race. It was rooted in social status and economic needs. People became slaves for various reasons. Some were prisoners of war. Others were sold into slavery due to debt or poverty. The lack of a social safety net meant many became slaves. This was especially true for those at the bottom of society. Slavery ensured a steady supply of labor. It helped maintain economic stability. Social status determined one's fate. The lower classes were most vulnerable. Wealth and influence offered protection. The poor had no such shield. This created a rigid social hierarchy. The gap between the rich and the poor was vast. Understanding social status and economic need explains why slavery was prevalent. It was an integral part of the societal structure. Enslaved individuals in ancient Egypt had various roles. They were laborers, domestic servants, and concubines. Each role came with its own set of hardships. Laborers worked on farms, in quarries, or constructing monuments. Their work was physically demanding and often dangerous. Domestic servants worked in the homes of their masters. They cooked, cleaned, and took care of children. This work was less physically demanding, but still grueling. Servants were constantly at the beck and call of their masters. They had little rest and no personal freedom. Some women were forced into concubinage. They became sexual slaves to their masters. This role was especially degrading. These women had no say over their bodies. They were seen as property and used for the pleasure of their owners. The roles of enslaved individuals were varied but uniformly harsh. Each role represented a life of servitude and exploitation. Neferura's story will highlight these aspects, focusing on the plight of women forced into concubinage. Sexual exploitation was a grim reality for many enslaved women. Concubinage was a common practice. Women were often taken as concubines against their will. They had no choice in the matter. This form of slavery was particularly dehumanizing. Concubines were seen as property. Their primary role was to provide sexual pleasure to their masters. They lived in constant fear and uncertainty. Their bodies were not their own. This lack of control over their own lives was a source of immense suffering. The emotional and psychological toll was significant. Many women faced abuse and humiliation daily. They were isolated from their families and communities. This isolation made their suffering even more profound. The story of Neferura will delve into these aspects. It will illustrate the brutal reality of sexual exploitation in ancient Egypt. Through her story, we aim to highlight the plight of countless women who endured similar fates. Section 5. Introducing Neferura. Neferura was a young woman born into slavery. Her mother was a domestic servant. Her father was a laborer. From a young age, Neferura understood the harsh realities of her life. She had no freedom or rights. Her future was bleak.
As I grew older, I was taken as a concubine by my master. This was a turning point in my life. I was forced into a role I did not choose. My body became a tool for my master's pleasure. This new role brought immense suffering.
Neferura's story is a representation of many enslaved women. Her experiences highlight the brutality of concubinage. She endured daily abuse and exploitation. Despite this, she found ways to cope and survive. Through Neferura's story, we can understand the personal impact of slavery. Her experiences shed light on the broader issues faced by enslaved women in ancient Egypt. Section 6. Daily exploitation and abuse. Neferura's daily life was filled with exploitation and abuse. Each day brought new horrors. Her master would summon her at any time. She had to be ready to obey his commands. The sexual exploitation was relentless.
This abuse was not limited to physical acts. Neferura faced constant emotional and psychological torment. I would degrade her with cruel words. I enjoyed asserting my power over her.
This daily abuse broke her spirit. Neferura was isolated from others. She had no friends or confidants. This isolation made her suffering even more profound. She longed for human connection but found none. Her life was a cycle of pain and despair.
Despite the relentless abuse, I sought ways to endure. I clung to small moments of solace.
Her story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of immense suffering. Section 7. Emotional and psychological bonds. Even in the harshest conditions, emotional and psychological bonds could form. Neferura found solace in the brief interactions with other slaves. These moments of connection were rare but precious.
I formed a bond with an older woman named Aset. She was a domestic servant who had also suffered greatly. She became a mother figure to me. Our bond provided emotional support. It was a small respite from our daily suffering.
These bonds were crucial for survival. They provided a sense of belonging and hope. Neferura and Aset shared their fears and dreams. This connection gave them strength to endure their harsh reality.
The emotional and psychological bonds among slaves were vital. They offered a glimmer of humanity in an otherwise dehumanizing existence. Neferura's bond with Aset highlights the importance of these connections. Section 8. Legal context of slavery. The legal context of slavery in ancient Egypt was complex. Slaves were considered property. They had no legal rights. Their status was defined by their masters. The law offered them no protection. Masters had complete control over their slaves. They could buy, sell, and punish them at will. This legal framework reinforced the power dynamics. It ensured that slaves remained powerless and subjugated. There were rare instances of slaves gaining freedom. However, these cases were exceptions. The majority of slaves lived and died in bondage. The legal system provided no avenues for redress. Understanding the legal context is crucial. It highlights the systemic nature of slavery. It shows how deeply entrenched the practice was in ancient Egyptian society. Neferura's story is a reflection of this harsh legal reality. Section 9. Social status of enslaved women. The social status of enslaved women was extremely low. They were at the bottom of the social hierarchy. Their status was defined by their servitude. They had no social or legal standing. Enslaved women were often isolated and marginalized. They had no voice in society. Their experiences and suffering were largely ignored. This social marginalization compounded their suffering. Neferura's story illustrates this social reality.
I was invisible to the world outside my master's home. My pain and suffering went unnoticed. My status as a concubine further degraded my social standing.
Understanding the social status of enslaved women is important. It provides context to their experiences. It highlights the additional layers of suffering they endured. Neferura's story is a poignant example of this harsh social reality. Section 10. Neferura's struggles and small joys. Despite the overwhelming hardship, Neferura found small joys. These moments were rare but cherished. She found solace in nature. The sight of the Nile River brought her peace.
The Nile River, it brought me peace.
Neferura also found joy in her bond with Aset. Their shared moments of laughter and conversation were precious.
Our laughter, our conversations, they were precious.
These small joys were a lifeline. They provided a brief escape from her harsh reality. Her struggles were immense. Each day was a battle for survival. Yet Neferura's resilience shone through. She clung to hope even in the darkest moments. Her spirit remained unbroken. Neferura's story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Her struggles and small joys highlight the resilience of enslaved women. They show that even in the darkest times, there is a flicker of hope. Section 11. Reflection on untold stories. The story of Neferura is just one among many. Countless enslaved women lived and suffered in ancient Egypt. Their stories remain largely untold. They are the silent victims of a brutal system. Reflecting on their experiences is important. It gives voice to their suffering. It ensures that their pain is not forgotten. Their stories are a crucial part of history. They provide a fuller understanding of ancient Egyptian society. Neferura's story is a reminder of the resilience and strength of enslaved women. It highlights the importance of remembering and honoring their experiences. Their stories, though untold, are a powerful testament to the human spirit. Through Neferura's narrative, we aim to shed light on the dark reality of slavery in ancient Egypt. We honor the memory of countless women who endured unimaginable suffering. Their stories are a vital part of our shared history.